Welcome back, America. I'm here with one of the great patriots in America, Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz has been warning about the corruption of our justice system. Ted Cruz is having to deal with it as a member of the United States Senate. He's just written a book, Justice Corrupted, How the Left Weaponized Our Legal System. Now, I want you to understand, this book is about as up-to-date as any book can be about what's happening to our country under Merrick Garland, the FBI, and the Democrats, and what they're doing to President Trump, to our parents, to January 6th, peaceful protesters. So, Ted Cruz, first of all, congratulations. Takes a couple of months to publish a book, but you're right on top of this. Why did you write this book, and what is it at its core that is concerning you?
Well, unfortunately, under the Democrats, they've turned the Department of Justice, they've turned the FBI, they've turned the intelligence community into political enforcers in a way that has never happened in the history of our country. You and I are both alums of DOJ. We both revere a Department of Justice that is fair, that is impartial, and the degree to which under Joe Biden, this department has been weaponized, that the deep state has taken over. It is dangerous, and it is a fundamental threat to our liberty. The book starts off with Loudoun County. Loudoun County, where a 14-year-old girl in the Loudoun County Public Schools was sexually assaulted in the bathroom by a boy wearing a skirt. And the school district covered it up. They insisted it didn't happen. They insisted this never happened. In fact, what the school district did, they transferred that predator to another school where he sexually assaulted another girl. And the school district refused to involve law enforcement. The parents, the dad, went to the school board and said, my daughter was raped at school. And he sat there and listened to the school board lie to him and insist that never happens. No boy wearing a skirt commits sexual assault. And instead of arresting the sexual predator, the school board arrested the dad, threw him to the ground, put him on handcuffs, arrested him. We saw this happen. What followed, though, is the National Association of School Boards sent a letter to Joe Biden asking the Department of Justice to go after not predators in schools that are hurting our kids, but to go after parents, to go after moms and dads. And 5 days later, Merrick Garland moved with laser speed. He wrote a memo directing the FBI, target parents, target moms and dads. The National Association of School Boards has said, treat them like domestic terrorists using the Patriot Act. And I'll tell you, I had Merrick Garland in front of the Judiciary Committee questioning him on it. He had done no work. He had no due diligence. I asked him in the letter, all right, how many instances are cited in this letter? I don't know. There were 20. How many of them were violent? He didn't know. He didn't care. And right now today, the DOJ and the FBI, they're interviewing moms and dads. They're treating the FBI as the political enforcers of the Democrats.
Ladies and gentlemen, the book is Justice Corrupted, How the Left Weaponized Our Legal System, which they certainly have done. Now, let's hone in briefly on Mar-a-Lago. You know, I say these so-called former federal prosecutors and legal analysts. You start with that warrant. That warrant was outrageous. It was so broad.
Yeah.
And then you move into breaking into Donald Trump's home. And the latest leak from the FBI and the Justice Department is he moved documents. He moved documents from one room to his office. I don't believe a subpoena prevents you from doing that, by the way. And so they think they have an obstruction case. So what do you make of this and all the leaks?
In 230 years of our nation's history, this has never happened. We've never seen the Department of Justice raid the home of a former president. It's being done by a successor of the opposing political party. It's being done because they want to attack Donald Trump. And this was a fishing expedition. Every former president has taken documents from his administration. Barack Obama did that. Bill Clinton did that. George W. Bush did that. This is an instance where the Biden administration is looking to gain political advantage. And one of the things that the book Justice Corrupted talks about, it starts off with Richard Nixon, because Richard Nixon tried to do this, tried to use DOJ and the FBI and the IRS to target his political enemies. By and large, the system worked. They resisted and said no. Well, what Richard Nixon tried to do, Barack Obama succeeded in doing, and now under Joe Biden, it is metastasized, where the institutional resistance of DOJ and the FBI has been worn down. They put hard partisans in the senior career levels at those institutions, and they now view themselves as the jackbooted thugs for the DNC. And that's not what the Department of Justice is supposed to be. That's not what the FBI is supposed to be.
Amen. And last time I checked, if you're going to investigate a potential candidate for president of the other party, you better have a special counsel or somebody independent, not the president's hand-picked lapdog. The book is Justice Corrupted, How the Left Weaponized Our Legal System. When we come back, Ted Cruz, I want to ask you about January 6th and several other issues. We'll be right back. Welcome back, America. Justice Corrupted, How the Left Weaponized Our Legal System. This book couldn't be more important than it is today. Ted Cruz, it's out on Tuesday. You can get your copy at Amazon.com immediately, and it'll show up at your steps. It's very important to read this before the election, America. What about January 6th? What do you make of how people are being prosecuted? They don't seem to be segregating the people who are nonviolent from the people who are violent, and overall they seem to be treated much differently than leftists who create all kinds of mayhem.
Yeah. Well, you're exactly right, Mark, and that's a big topic of this book. And in fact, this book is the first inside account of what happened on January 6th. And so I take the reader through the events of the 2020 election leading up to January 6th. I take them through the evidence of election fraud and voter fraud in November 2020, which the Democrats and the corporate media insist doesn't exist. I walk them through the litigation, all the different cases that went on, and I walk them through my being asked by the lawyers in the Pennsylvania case if the Supreme Court took that case for me to argue that case. I said, yes, I would be happy to. I walk in the book through President Trump asking me with the Texas case at the Supreme Court, if the Supreme Court took the Texas case, if I would argue that. And I told President Trump I'd be happy to. I walked them through that day on January 6th, where in the days beforehand, I worked to assemble a coalition of 11 senators to stand up and object and to demand an election commission and to examine the evidence of voter fraud. I walked through trying to keep that coalition together, standing up and objecting. And then I walked through the riot that happened, working to try to keep those senators together while some senators were getting wobbly. And I walked them through the whole narrative to understand what happened. So if you're at home talking to people about January 6th, the left uses wildly politicized terms like insurrection, which is complete political garbage. Anyone who uses that word is engaged in partisan spin. I walked through what happened that day. And the contrast, and your question was exactly right. What the Biden DOJ has done is it's used the actions of a handful of people on that day who committed acts of violence. And let me be clear. Anyone who commits an act of violence should be prosecuted. If you assault a police officer, you should go to jail for a long time. That's true whether I agree with you or disagree with you, whether you're right wing or left wing. If you assault a cop, you're going to jail. What the Biden DOJ has done is it's used the violent acts of a few to target and smear the tens of thousands of peaceful protesters who were in Washington on January 6th, and more fundamentally, the tens of millions of conservatives and Trump voters across this country. And the double standard is ridiculous. At the same time, they ignore the Black Lives Matter and Antifa rioters who firebombed police cars, who looted homes, who murdered police officers, who committed horrific crimes. Kamala Harris, the sitting vice president, bailed out of jail violent protesters who were engaged in Black Lives Matter and Antifa protests. And I ask in the book questions like, who is Ray Epps? Why are the January 6th prisoners treated differently than other prisoners? Why are so many in solitary confinement? All of these are questions that this DOJ, were it fair, were it impartial, would be willing to answer. But they simply stonewall. And you want to know what the stakes of this election are? The stakes of this election are the rule of law. You and I both revere the Constitution and the rule of law. Why do we have prosperity in America where much of the developing world doesn't? Because we've had the rule of law, because our judicial system is not just a political weapon to persecute the enemies of the president. Well, under Barack Obama and now Joe Biden, that is what it's becoming, and that is extraordinarily dangerous.
The book is Justice Corrupted, How the Left Weaponized Our Legal System. Very, very important book. What would you say about law enforcement generally in this country? I see a distinction between local law enforcement and what's happened to the FBI.
Well, listen, police officers across this country are heroes, and they're feeling demoralized and undermined by Democrats and the radicals in this party. One of the things I talk about is how President Biden is nominated, and every Democrat has voted to confirm not one, not two, but three of the leading proponents of abolishing and defunding the police to senior positions at the Department of Justice. Not only that, I talk about George Soros prosecutors, a really dangerous phenomenon where Soros has put millions in terms of electing radicals who let violent criminals go. I talk about, for example, the Waukesha Christmas parade murderer, that mass murderer who drove his SUV into the crowd, murdering children, murdering little old ladies. He had gone in and out with a left-wing George Soros prosecutor who kept letting him go. That is happening across this country, and it is radicalized. It is dangerous, and I try to connect it to this is a direct threat. You know, you talk about Marxist a lot. This book goes into critical race theory and Ketanji Brown Jackson. I was at Harvard Law School with Ketanji Brown Jackson. I bring readers in to the origins of critical race theory, how it is explicitly Marxist. And the Soros prosecutors are also explicitly Marxist. They come in and say, one of the ways to undermine our criminal justice system is take over the role of the prosecutor and simply refuse to lock up criminals. And that danger is profound. Listen, you and I, neither one of us want to see a Republican Department of Justice. We don't want to see a Democrat Department of Justice. We want to see a Department of Justice and an FBI that follows the law fairly and impartially. This book walks through Crossfire Hurricane and how the Obama DOJ and the intelligence community targeted Donald Trump, fabricated documents, engaged in an absolute corrupt persecution with the Hillary Clinton party. And let me say this finally. Last time I went on your show was my last book, One Vote Away. We went on the show, One Vote Away, shot to #1 on the Amazon bestseller list. We released it right when Ruth Bader Ginsburg had died. This book, as it's coming out, I'm hopeful we'll see the same thing. And I got to say, this DOJ is exercising every day the abuse of power that we're talking about. This book explains why, and it explains why this election in November matters so much.
Superb. It's a great book, folks. Justice Corrupted, How the Left Weaponized Our Legal System. I encourage you to go to Amazon.com, any major bookstore. Ted, thank you, my friend. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Mark.
We'll be right back.